Welcome to Divine Intimacy Radio, a co-production of EWTN Radio and SpiritualDirection.com, where we provide you with a spiritual haven of rest and explore the riches of the wisdom of the saints and the path to union with God.
This is Dan and Jordan Burke. Welcome to Divine Intimacy Radio, your radio haven of rest.
Your hermitage of the heart.
Wow, you got it right that time.
I was thinking about it this time.
Your monastery of the mind, where you lift your hearts and minds to heaven, where we lift our hearts and minds to heaven to draw on the wisdom of the saints to help us to navigate the tumult of this life. A lot of people don't realize where the doctrine of the church comes from. And what they don't realize that, you know, when I talk about wisdom of the saints, most of the time on this show, we talk about spiritual theology, spirituality and marriage, all of this stuff. But moral theology is really important. And we get our theology primarily from the doctors of the church.
Right.
And so the doctors and councils and, popes. But, when the church it elevates these specific writers for a purpose. Doctors are all saints, and they all have written something that the church determines is good for all ages. Some people like to suppress in our age Thomas Aquinas and Alphonsus Liguori, but that's going against the magisterial designation of the value of their teaching for all ages.
Right.
But anyway, today, just a little bit of a warning today. We're going to be talking about moral theology, but we're going to be talking about masturbation and mortal sin, mostly about mortal sin in relationship to that subject.
As an easy example.
Yeah, so parental advisory.
Right.
The other thing that's going to happen today that I don't like in this show, and that is I don't like calling out people by name. I just don't. I appreciate the same about Michael Warsaw, and EWTN has kind of a good sense of that as well. However, sometimes when people have big audiences and they say things publicly, they have to be addressed publicly to counteract the public problem that the situation, causes.
Yeah, infighting is probably one of the biggest sins of the laity, especially in the church,
especially in this time.
And it's I know for a fact that's something that we avoid purposefully. But as you said, when someone has an audience, a large enough audience, and they say something that merits a response because what they said is danger to their audience, then it has to be addressed.
So in this case, we're talking about a recent video put out by Father Casey Cole. And I will say, if you watch the video, I'd say the first half is just rock solid.
Yeah.
I mean,
there's
nothing wrong with anything he says. But then he moves into what I would call a very common and egregious error of our time. And that is treating sin as if the only thing that matters is our culpability.
Right.
And you'll hear nothing in the video about the objective evil, the impact on God.
Yeah, well, to give him credit, he does quote the church and
the catechism.
The church teaches on, he says, well, this is an intrinsic evil. So I don't want someone listening thinking, well, he said it's an intrinsic evil he's talking about. It's like, no, that's not what we're talking about. What we're saying is you can state what the church teaches, but what is the reality of that statement? And that's what he doesn't get into.
Right. Not well anyway.
Right.
And I think, and the com box of his video is filled with confusion.
Right. Well, and I can't tell you how many messages that I received from people after the fact who saw my response and who just were saying, thank you so much. I watched the video. I was so deeply confused. This is something that I've struggled with. I had one guy who just poured his heart out and he said, I watched his video and I was enraged. This is what this one person said, because I know that what I am struggling with it, but I know that it's wrong. And when I watched his video, I came away with, no, it's not that big of a deal and you shouldn't worry about it.
Yeah. And who knows what his intent is. We can't judge his intent.
Of course. But that's the response. That's what people are coming away with. That's the fruit of what he's presenting.
So let's get to you and why you're on the show. I mean, you've been on the show before to do the harder thing, to talk about you're an authorized representative, if you will, of Sophia Institute Press for Gabriel Amorth's book,
Pope's Exorcist.
or the book on Gabriel North.
Sure.
So why are people reaching out to you?
Well, so when I started Do the Harder Thing, it was aimed primarily towards combating or helping people combat pornography and masturbation. So it was both showing the reality of what pornography is, because one of my methods was the truth of what you're actually seeing is so disturbing that it needs to be impactful. And people need to know that, much of what they're watching, there's all these statistics are out there. Much of what they're watching is not consensual.
Right.
So we're talking about rape.
Yeah.
We're talking about sex trafficking. We're talking
about slavery, sex slavery.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that reality, but then also I've had discussions and communications, and I even went to a clinic and talked to some of the greatest therapists on this topic in the nation, in the nation, and had all these communications, and basically took their non-religious understanding, and it's all good and true, and combined it with what the church teaches, because when you combine those two, that's when people start breaking free. So taking that kind of information, putting it out there, and so since then I've counseled, I don't know, probably, I don't keep track, probably thousands of guys. I don't do that. I will still help people, and I even said in my response video, if you need help, here's how you get in contact with me. I will help you. I will reply to every message that I can. But I don't do that. I don't do that anymore as my main. That's not my main mission anymore, but it's still a cursory mission. And I still stay pretty much up to date on that. But there's other organizations. Generally, I refer people to Integrity Restored, Jim O'Day. Who they're full time. That's all
Father
they do.
Sean Kilcawley.
I don't know if he's in Integrity Restored.
Oh, he's not.
But Father Sean Kilcawley is another incredible.
Yeah, he's fantastic.
Yeah.
He teaches for us at the Institute.
Yeah.
So now you came up with an immediate action plan. Is that the name of it?
Yeah, it's an immediate action plan. It's 5 steps. And I even have it set up on the website where you don't have to enter any information.
Which website?
dotheharderthing.com.
Yeah.
You don't need to enter any information. Just download it. You know, if you're struggling, just download it and follow the steps. And it's not guaranteed to just, you're done, because this is a whole longer discussion, but we're talking about habits and ingrained actions and things like that. But it's a good stepping point to overcoming. Yeah, at least you're now taking steps. To overcome.
All right. So let's get to the problems in the video. Right. So the first half was fine, as we said. It was just repeating church teaching.
Father Casey's video.
Father Casey Cole's video. And then but the second was, then he started to, I don't know, disassemble healthy concern, I think. I don't know. Take a shot at, what bothered you the most when you first watched it?
It really,
or troubled you the most? It
really muddied the waters on a very clear topic. And I think the argument that some people would say, well, it's not that clear because, there's aspects and layers of culpability and things of that nature. And my response would be, how about you just worry about not sinning?
Right.
I mean, we're talking about something that's so egregious,
right,
and so harmful, not just to yourself, to your loved ones, but to God.
Yeah.
And I still get messages daily, if not every other day, someone saying, my husband is addicted to pornography. It's destroying our marriage. This is what's going on, blah, blah, blah. It is the real pandemic.
Yeah.
In terms of what's going on in the world right now. It's worse than it's ever been.
Yeah.
And so for me, watching somebody muddy the waters, and I understand the desire to teach people moral theology. If you enjoy moral theology, that's fine. But taking something like this, that is as serious as this topic is, pornography and masturbation, and muddying the waters is scandalous, in my opinion.
I agree.
Because it's very clear cut.
Yeah.
You need to just stop.
Right. Right.
And if you're spending effort trying to figure out, well, am I culpable or am I not culpable? That's effort that you could be spending on pursuing virtue. And that's what wasn't discussed in the video. Basically, it was like, just do your best. Go and to give him credit, he said, go to confession, whether or not you think it's mortal or not. So good. Go to confession.
That is great advice.
Right.
I mean, one of the there's some really simple advice out of this show. Stop sinning. And some people are going to say, even through tears. I mean, I remember my family's full of addictions and
Sure.
drug rehab and all that. And remember one of my brothers just weeping, telling me about how he couldn't find a Narcotics Anonymous sponsor that would stick with him.
Right.
And he was begging for help. And so some of these people are like that. They're like, you know, they're listening to us going, yeah, but I am screwed up,
right
to the core. And so we're not discounting. So when we say stop sinning, it is not with insensitivity. It's to combat. You shouldn't spend, in my opinion, any time worrying about culpability. Go to confession. Because confession isn't just about the forgiveness of sins. And I think a lot of times with this sin in particular, and I don't know from personal experience, thank God, I have other problems, but not this one. But I know from talking with priests and psychologists and seminary formators, and we do seminary formation, is that guys will often use, or guys and women and men will often use the confessional as an almost like inebriation.
So that's one of the other things that I wanted to touch on, because if we're going to talk about moral theology in this context, why are we not also talking about firm purpose of amendment?
Right.
So if we're going to just
what is that?
Firm purpose of amendment. So, I mean, St. John Paul II actually wrote a letter to the bishops that was so impactful for me when I read it, talking about firm purpose. And he basically said, if you don't have a firm purpose of amendment, your confession isn't valid.
Right.
Now, I don't want to send people into a tailspin, but what that means is if you're just going to confession to like, oh, I did it wrong, I did bad again, I need to go.
Give me relief. Give me relief. I want to be forgiven.
But you're not taking any steps to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Right.
That's the issue. So you need to have what's called a firm purpose of amendment, which is, okay, you're analyzing. You're saying this is where you spend time analyzing, not culpability. You say, okay, crap. All right. I was really angry today. Okay. I was scrolling through Instagram and I got triggered. Okay. When I'm angry, I can't scroll through Instagram. What am I going to do? That is taking steps towards firm purpose of amendment. I know guys, and for folks, we're going to say guys because that's who I dealt with. And I always get a message that says women struggle with it too. I know. I'm just using this language because this is what I work in.
Yeah.
Trust me, my heart breaks for women just as much as it does for men. So just want to clear that up. But, you know, I know guys who've locked their phones in their cars.
Yeah.
Because they know nighttime, I'm more susceptible to falling.
That's heroic.
Exactly. Yeah. But that's a firm purpose of amendment. Yeah. But that's not what was talked about. It was just do your best.
Yeah.
And, you know.
All right. When we get back from the break, we'll continue talking about this very difficult subject. If you're coming in the middle, parental advisory, it's tough stuff. So not for younger kids or early teens. But we'll continue to dive into how to understand and get, overcome habitual mortal sin and how to better think about it than what was shown in this video. We'll be right back.
Hi friends, we want to personally invite you to check out all of our upcoming retreats here at Avila. Head over to spiritualdirection.com/events or click on the events tab on the top of spiritualdirection.com and sign up now for one of our powerful mini retreats, Setting the Captives Free or Into the Deep or Divine Intimacy in Marriage. Now with both live and online options, our mini retreats can be live streamed right into your living room or parish meeting room. Discover why these events sell out time and time again. That's spiritualdirection.com/events. Register today. There is a growing need for well-formed, solid spiritual directors in the church today. The Avila Institute, in collaboration with Heart of Christ Spiritual Direction Program, offers a certificate in spiritual direction for those who feel called to accompany others in their journey towards God. The program is grounded in Ignatian and Carmelite spirituality based on a Catholic worldview and draws on the wisdom of the saints with an emphasis on biblical principles in the new evangelization. This program offers both online and on-site classes. Discover more and apply today at avila-institute.org.
This is Dan and Jordan Burke. Welcome back to Divine Intimacy Radio. We're talking about mortal sin, masturbation, habitual sin, difficult subject, parental advisory. So I just want to remind folks about a good places for resources. One is dotheharderthing.com, free.
Yeah.
You don't even capture information about people
Right.
in order to email them or sell them
Right.
anything or whatever. Just free, nothing but trying to help people.
Right.
And there they'll find the
immediate action plan.
immediate
And that will, if you're just struggling, and even if you've been struggling for a while, there might be something in there that will help you.
Yeah.
My shedding blood talk you can find online, which we're actually going to be redoing, and we're going to package in a way that we'll let everybody know so they can find it, because it's way more in depth going into those 5 steps. You'll find good info in there. Integrity Restored is another amazing one. Father Sean Kilcawley, his resources for women, I believe. Rachel Kilcawley also has resources. Integrity Restored has resources for women as well. So anyway, the one thing we don't want to do is what happened, which was
leave people hanging.
Yeah.
The other place you can go for free resource, which it's more I would say community engagement, that sort of thing, if you're feeling isolated, is apostoleva.org, and that's a community that I founded to help people live the contemplative life. In there, it does require it's free, but it requires you to get some orientation about how to act in community, because we're kind of social media attitude the place. It's a safe, peaceful place.
Break the curse of Facebook.
Apostoleva.org. And in that I have an in-depth course on overcoming habitual sins. If you don't know what Jordan's talking about, or you want more than what you find in the immediate action plan, which you can go get right now, just easy as can be, at dotheharderthing.com. If you need more and formal teaching and teaching on discernment of spirits, which will help you break sin and all of that, the apostoleva.org, free courses there as well. So back to where we were, John Paul II said, if you don't have a firm purpose of amendment. So when people go to confession, confession isn't just about forgiveness,
right?
Which is a shallow understanding. It's really important, okay,
right,
but just to go get it off your back, that's not even right thinking at all. But I want to be forgiven. Good. Yes, you'll be forgiven. It's one of the most powerful things I ever heard in my life. Was the first time I heard a priest say, I absolve you.
Right.
Wow. Just sent shivers down my spine. But confession is also there to give you strength against sin, but it has to be a valid confession, as you noted. You've got to have a firm purpose of amendment. You have to have contrition. I mean, you have to be sorry that you did it.
And I want to know how many people even know about presumption.
What do you mean?
Well, because that's another aspect. Again, if we're going to spend time in quote unquote moral theology around this topic, in my opinion, you should be equipping people with what matters the most.
Right.
Not, ambiguity about culpability, but rather saying, hey, here's what you should be aware of. Are you presuming forgiveness? Are you going to look at pornography and think, I can just go to confession in the morning? That's presumption. That's another mortal sin.
Right.
So
mortal sin on top of mortal sin.
Right. So if you're doing that, if you have presumption going into confession, that also could invalidate what's going on, because you're not truly, you don't have a truly contrite heart. You're just going to ease your own emotions, right? Because you're like, I'm just going to get forgiven. That's presumption.
Yeah.
So that's on the front end, and then we already talked about firm purpose of amendment on the back end.
Right.
So those would have been more appropriate topics, I think, or more helpful to people in regard to this overall conversation. But anyway.
And you did a good video on this, which is what prompted me to want to do this show with you. What's the title of the video? Is it on spiritualdirection.com yet?
I don't know if it's on our website. It's on our YouTube. You're talking about the response video?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's is masturbation and pornography a mortal sin? Response to Father Casey Cole, I think, is the full title. It's on our YouTube.
Spiritualdirection.com YouTube page. Subscribe, share it. And that video, this can be shared easily. It'll be up in that same area, and then also on spiritualdirection.com eventually. But your video, I think, will speak to, I mean, it was very compelling.
Yeah.
So the other thing that he said, which was good, Father Cole, just to keep giving credit where it's due, even though I don't agree with him on a lot of things,
almost everything.
Personally, he said, go to confession.
Right.
Now, a lot of people are taught you shouldn't go to confession with if you have venial sin. I mean, some churches, I'm aware, even my own parish, before our current pastor got there, they were told you don't have to go to confession, which, wow, I fear for that guy's experience in hell or final judgment or whatever.
Right.
Who knows, right? What's going to happen? But
assuming he carries down the same path, because that's pretty egregious.
That's incredibly egregious. So then, in a better scenario, you're received well when you take a mortal sin. Unfortunately, many people are turned away when they take their venial sins, but the church has always encouraged, even up till recent times, post-conciliar, after the Second Vatican Council, informal exhortations has said that it's good to take your venial sins to confession. And here's the thing: if you do that, if you go, okay, this is going to sound a little bit harsh. To hell with distinctions again of mortal and venial.
Right.
Go to confession if you have habitual sin.
Right.
And then you don't have to worry about if it's mortal or venial.
Right.
And you don't have to self-delude. I always like to say the human person has an infinite capacity for self-delusion.
Right.
And very little innate capacity for honest self-reflection.
Well, and I think I even said in the video, either the first or second part of it, I don't recall, but in my experience, having talked to thousands of men on this topic, from every walk of life, all ages, every type of background, there are two people who are searching: is masturbation a mortal sin? Is pornography a mortal sin? There's only two types of people who are doing that. One who is trying to look for some sort of information to pacify their bad feelings. So like they want to justify what they're doing.
Right.
Or they're scrupulous. So neither of those are good.
Right. Don't feed either of those beasts.
Right. Exactly.
Go to confession.
There's literally never been an in between.
Right.
Never been an in between.
Right.
It's one of those two extremes.
Right.
So I have to, I'm not just, this wasn't just like, well, I'm not a fan of Casey Cole. So, and I pray for him daily, for the record. But I'm just going to do a response because I don't like what he's saying. It's like, no. This is
damaging.
This is damaging. And I know who is searching this.
Now, let's take a shift to another dimension that is almost never talked about in these subjects. And that is the dimension of evil, objective evil related to the act.
Right.
Without regard to culpability. And one of our staff members, we were standing around talking about this in the Avila Institute offices, said something like, what does it matter whether you press one thorn into his head or two?
Right.
And it just about knocked me over.
Right.
And I thought, that is so powerful.
Right.
So what does it matter? Mortal or venial in this case? If it's habitual, and here's the thing, John the Beloved, who wrote his epistles in the New Testament, of course, the Gospel of John, used some very harsh language for those who are in habitual sin. He said, when you are in habitual sin, and I'm paraphrasing, you are of the devil.
Yeah.
I talk about this a lot. When you look into the Greek, that means subject to, beneath, controlled by, yielding to, making him your God.
Right.
And there's no way that comes out in any kind of translation that should do anything but just shake you to your stinking boots.
Right.
So be of God by not parsing, not trying to justify, and turning off folks who do.
Right. Like,
to me, anyone who sits around, and I think, part of the reason I think is done this is a false mercy.
Right.
Because I suspect Father Casey cares about people, really, truly does. And oftentimes when that happens, you look out on the audience and when tough teaching is given, people come and they're rattled. And then therefore we can't do that. It's like, no. They came.
Right.
They're rattled. So help them.
Right.
That's a path. Because when we teach publicly, we should teach strongly. We should use doctrinal language in clarity, not relational language.
Right.
And then privately, we counsel with huge amount of mercy and gentleness.
Right.
But publicly, we need to proclaim the truth with clarity, or these kind of things happen.
You talk to so many people today, and what's their biggest complaint about what's going on in the church is ambiguity.
Right.
Left and right ambiguity. Right. And from people who should know better.
Right.
And we are assuming the best, that they're just trying to be relational.
Yeah.
But that causes that ambiguity.
Yeah.
And it's so I mean, again, you look at the fruits of what's happening. And in this case, you read his comment section, and it's stunning. You know,
I hope he reads it and kind of backtrack.
Yeah.
I've seen him backtrack before.
Some of his responses were pretty poor, unfortunately. But
yeah,
that's why, like I said, pray for him daily. So
and that's why we're doing this. That's why we're doing this show. Yeah. Look, you know, the Lord wants you free. He died for you. He knew. And by the way, just so you understand his love, he created you at the beginning of time, knowing, at the beginning of your time, knowing what you would do, knowing that your sins would result in, across all time and eternity, the stripes, the flesh ripped off of his back, the spit in his face, the humiliation, the stripping of his garments. He knew that you would do that, and he loved you anyway, and he brought you into existence. He wants an eternal relationship with you. There is no condemnation for those in Christ Jesus. So get in,
right?
Put off the old man, as St. Paul said, put on the new, fight like heaven to get the hell out of you. And you listen to Divine Intimacy Radio, or you're hearing this show maybe for the first time. We have endless resources for you, brothers and sisters.
For free.
For free.
Our only mission is to help people be free.
Right.
And get to heaven. I mean, it's not that complicated. And I can tell you, by the grace of God, was able to get free. I know so many others who have the same results, and it's possible. So if you're listening and you're struggling, it's possible.
dotheharderthing.com, spiritualdirection.com, apostoleva.org. It's all there for you, all free, to help you to get free, to know the freedom that Jesus paid for you. And with that, we're having to conclude this show. I hope it's been helpful to you or somebody that you love.
Until next time, may the God of peace make you perfect in holiness. May he preserve you whole and entire, spirit, soul, and body, irreproachable at the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ.
Amen.
Learn more about the interior life. Visit spiritualdirection.com. Divine Intimacy Radio is a co-production of EWTN Radio and spiritualdirection.com, and heard worldwide on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.